Cindrella. The Cinder Girl. Once upon a time, there was a rich man who lived happily with his wife and daughter. One day, his wife fell sick. When she felt that her end was drawing near, she called her only daughter near her and said, "Dear child, be good and pious, and God will always take care of you. I will look upon you from heaven and will be with you." And then she closed her eyes forever. The maiden went every day to her mother's grave and wept, and remained pious and good. When winter came, the snow covered the grave with a white covering. Then the sun came in the early spring and melted it away. Soon Cinderella's father married again. The new wife was a proud and unkind woman. The new wife brought her two daughters along with her. Though they were beautiful and fair in appearance, at heart they were wicked and ugly. And then began the evil times for the poor girl. "Is the stupid creature to sit in the same room with us?" asked they. "Those who eat food must earn it. She is nothing but a kitchen maid." They took away her pretty dresses and forced her to put on an old grey one. They also gave her wooden shoes to wear. The stepsisters laughed at her and sent her to the kitchen. There she was made to do heavy work from morning to night, get up early in the morning, draw water, make the fire, cook and wash. In the evenings she was quite tired after the day's hard work. As she had no bed to lie upon, she had to rest on the hearth among the cinders. She always looked dusty and dirty as she slept in the cinders. So they named her Cindrella. The magic begins. One day, the young prince of the land invited all the young girls of the kingdom to a ball, planning to choose his princess from amongst them. Cinderella's sisters were delighted on hearing this invitation. They selected the best gowns, they dressed their hairs, but they were not taking Cinderella with them. "You can go when beggars hold a ball," they told her. "Comb our hair, brush our shoes, and make our buckles fast. We are going to the prince's ball." When she heard this, Cinderella couldn't help crying, for she too liked to go to the party. She begged her stepmother to take her along. "What, you Cinderella? In all your dust and dirt, you want to go to the ball? You have no dress and no shoes. You want to dance?" She turned her back to Cinderella and hurriedly set out with her two proud daughters. When Cinderella lost sight of them, she felt very sad. She started crying. Tears rolled down her cheeks. She thought of her own mother. "If my mother had been alive, she would have sent me to the ball." Suddenly, she heard a voice. "You will certainly go to the ball. I am your fairy godmother." Cinderella turned around. She saw a fairy standing in front of her. "I am the queen of fairies," she said. "I will send you to the ball." "Well," said her godmother, "be a good girl, and I will contrive that you shall go." She went with Cinderella into her chamber and told her, "Run into the garden and bring me a pumpkin." Cinderella went immediately to gather the finest pumpkin she could get, and brought it to her godmother. She could not imagine how this pumpkin could help her go to the ball. The fairy waved a magic wand over the pumpkin. Suddenly, the pumpkin changed into a red coach. Then the fairy said, "You will travel in this coach to the palace. We must have horses to draw it. There is a mousetrap in the backyard of your house. Bring it to me." Cindrella went out and brought the mousetrap. There were 6 mice in it. The fairy waved the magic wand over it, and all the mice were turned into 6 white horses. Looking at the coach and horses, the fairy said, "Now we have a coach to travel in and 6 horses to draw it. But we haven't any footman. Go again into the garden and you will find 6 lizards behind the watering pot. Bring them." When Cindrella brought the lizards, the fairy changed them into footmen. The footmen bowed at her. They wore blue and yellow clothes. Cindrella was very happy to see them, but she became sad when she looked at her clothes. "But I cannot go in these rags," she said. "I will give you wonderful clothes," the fairy said. The fairy touched Cindrella with her magic wand. Her rags changed into beautiful clothes of silk and gold. There were diamonds in her hair, and she wore 2 pretty glass shoes. Then the fairy said, "You can go to the ball now, but remember, the magic ends at 12 o'clock. You must return home before that time." The ball. Cindrella went to the ball dressed in wonderful clothes. She rode in the red coach. 6 footmen waited on her. In the ballroom, she looked like a princess. Nothing was then heard but a confused noise. "How beautiful she is! How beautiful she is!" The prince noticed her at once. He danced only with her. Her sisters were now jealous of her, but they didn't recognize Cindrella. She went on dancing and forgot about the time. Then the clock started to strike 12. She now remembered the words of the fairy. She bowed to the prince and ran quickly out of the ballroom. Arriving home, she ran to seek out her godmother to tell everything that had happened at the ball. She said that she heartily wished she could go to the ball the next day as well, because the prince had invited her. Then her 2 sisters knocked at the door. Cindrella ran and opened the door. "You stayed such a long time," she cried, gaping, rubbing her eyes and stretching herself as if she had been sleeping. "If you had been at the ball," said one of her sisters, "you would not have been tired with it. The finest princess was there, the most beautiful that mortal eyes have ever seen." Cindrella seemed very indifferent to what they said. Indeed, she asked them the name of the princess, but they told her they didn't know. Cindrella, smiling, replied, "She must then be very beautiful indeed. How happy you have been! Could not I see her? Oh, dear sister, do lend me your yellow dress which you wear every day." "Yes, to be sure," cried her sisters. "Lend my clothes to such a dirty cinder wench as you are? I should be such a fool." The entire family burst into laughter. The next day, the 2 sisters were at the ball, and so was Cindrella, dressed even more magnificently than before. The prince was always by her side, and never ceased to give his compliments and kind words to her. Cindrella forgot about the time. She thought that it was no later than 11 when she counted the clock striking 12. She jumped up and fled as nimble as a deer. In her hurry, she left one of her glass shoes in the ballroom. As she reached the coach, she heard the last ding-dong. Suddenly the coach became a pumpkin, the horse turned into mice, and the footmen into green lizards. Her clothes became the old rags again, but the one shoe on her foot was unchanged. She reached home before her sisters arrived, so they didn't know about her going to the ball. The search. The prince became very sad when Cindrella left him. His servants brought him the glass shoe that Cindrella had left in the room. He wanted to find out the beautiful girl who had danced with him. The next day he sent messengers to announce that the prince would visit every home to find out the lady. This news excited the ladies. The two stepsisters were very glad because they had pretty feet. They put on their best clothes and waited for the prince. But Cindrella didn't have any good clothes. The prince visited every house. He invited girls to try on the shoe Cindrella had left in the ballroom. The girls tried it on, but it didn't fit any one of them. Finally, the prince reached Cindrella's house. The eldest stepsister went to her room to try on the shoe, and her mother stood by. But she couldn't get her big toe into it, for the shoe was too small. Then her mother handed her a knife and said, "Cut the toe off, for when you are a queen, you will never have to go on foot." So the girl cut off her toe, squeezed her foot into the shoe. She concealed her pain and went down to the prince. The prince looked at her shoe and saw blood flowing under it. Not the right bride at all. The prince shouted in anger. Then the other sister tried the shoe. She went into her room to do so and got her toes comfortably in, but her heel was too large. Then her mother handed her the knife, saying, "Cut a piece of your heel. When you are the queen, you will never have to go on foot." So the girl cut off a piece of her heel and thrust her foot into the shoe. The prince looked at her feet and became more angry and shouted, "There is blood on your shoe. The shoe is too small, not the right bride at all." Then Cindrella came forward and said, "Let me try it." Her sisters laughed at her. "Clear out of here. How dare you come here in these dirty rags, you ugly creature?" They said, "But the prince asked her to try the shoe. I have seen you somewhere, but I cannot remember where," he said. Cindrella put her left foot into the shoe, and it fitted her perfectly. Everybody was astonished. She then pulled out the other shoe from her pocket and put it on her right foot. Just then the fairy appeared and touched her with a magic wand. In a moment, her rags changed into clothes of silk and gold. The prince danced with joy and cried, "This is the right bride. The shoes are fit for her. She is the right bride after all." He said to Cindrella, "You are the most beautiful girl in the country. I will make you my bride." The prince married and took her to the palace. Cindrella pardoned her sisters and took them to the palace. They lived there happily thereafter.